on the precipice of an invasion against our cause without knowing where they will come, but aware that behind the invaders was the full support of the powerful government of the United States. The voice of the Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Cruz, almost broken due to long hours without sleep, rose above the crowd that gathered here in this historic corner to declare that we were what we continue to be, a socialist revolution under the noses of the empire. That declaration is transcendental in the history of Cuba to mark the definitive path of our revolutionary process. Began with the triumph of 1959, and that by 1961 had been deeply rooted in favor of the dispossessed. The mercenaries aimed to move against the nation that saw them where they were burned, convinced that nothing could stop the support guaranteed by the empire. But history would be unrelentless with them. They expected fear but found courage. They bet to treason and they were faced by a people united. They believed the lies, their own lies, and truth was waiting for them with rifles at hand and singing the anthem. The Cuban people rallied from here to combat, and from combat to victory. And as the war was finishing, in less than 72 hours later, the first great defeat of imperialism in America. From that April of militiamen and women, all the peoples of the region would be a little bit freer. Cuba changed forever. The people that fought in the sense of Iran for socialism by then had begun its transformation, its cultural transformation, with a campaign of literacy that rose the levels of the humbles to university classrooms. The human development will reach levels that can only be guaranteed in a fair society. This revolution would reach so far, a revolution with the humbles, for the humbles, that as children that cleaned boots under capitalism would become the first cosmonaut of Latin America. That we will share our blood and luck with those forgotten. And we defeated apartheid in Africa. And we defeated illiteracy. And we defeated this in other lands of the world, to which we brought doctors and not bombs, teachers and not bombs. That's socialism. A society where men are brothers and not owner of men. In the 90s, the socialist practice was self-destroyed in Europe by thousands of conspirations of their imperialist adversaries. Cuba resisted and transformed until rising with its own efforts and in support of international solidarity. Chavez had not triumphed in Venezuela still, nor was for begin the decade of integration of the Bolivarian Revolution. Fidel, once again Fidel, as he did in Girón, leading the combat and moving forward on attack in the vanguard, he led that supernatural struggle to preserve Cuban socialism in a time of an advance of neoliberalism in the world. While others privatized parks and hospitals, believing blindly in the tale of the market that will bring a wealth that never came, this country rose a monumental work with science and the potential in science and workers formed by the revolution and with heroism and the creative resistance of the Cuban people. And our army, our people's army, went to sow and build to defeat, as Raúl said, yes, we can. We will always be able, and we were able to. That's socialism. Many times throughout those years, while the country was working on perfect adapt the mistreated economy by the blockade, numerous silent invasions were made, laws to qualify the blockade, terrorist attack, discredit campaigns, sabotage, constant sabotage to all projects of integration, solidarity, and cooperation. Every silence bomb that fell on the project for development has left a wound in the Cuban society. One of the most painful was the migration of promising youth taught freely in our schools and universities, to which are bought by capitalism, the talent in which they did not invest, while they accused the society that did not provide the guaranteed the labor market offers. The truth is said that human potential that began to reach relevant space in any country that they arrived, they were formed by socialism. Only socialism turned the sons and daughters of farmers and workers, of professionals of the first level, and not exceptionally as happens in capitalism, but in mass. To hide the genocidal character of the 6-decade blockade that asphyxiates the whole people and can only be called in embargo in the paper of those that apply it, they have built a narrative, a deceitful narrative. Cuba, they are calling Cuba now a failed state. It's very visible the impacts of decades of blockade and financial persecution of our homes, industries, in the lack of resources, in the shortage of almost anything, even in the most basic elements for life. It's also visible our own mistakes in this process of construction with peculiar characteristics, in which we are going against current, overcoming infinite obstacles. But as long as the blockade continues, no one will be able to deny, and I say this, no one will be able to deny its complete fault in the pain of Cuban families. The main cause of our issues is the genocidal blockade of the United States government against our people. Liars also say, with the anesthesia induced in their mind, contaminated by prejudice and the mode of anti-communism, since the Revolution of October rose to power, against all socialist experiences, brutal aggressions have been made, and also blockades. And even this, it is undeniable all that they brought in terms of balance and well-being to humanity. History will not be able to erase the colossal contribution of the USSR for the defeat of fascism and the conquest of the cosmos. Now, the achievements of that nation, like the Republic of China, that from a small country that endured 3 wars and today conquest the admiration of everyone for their growth, the heroic and brotherly people of Vietnam. Socialism is the only guarantee of social justice, the only path of emancipation, of real emancipation of everyone. And in our case, it has been and will be and is the real possibility to give collective answers to the collective punishment that has been imposed on us across the decades. To those that manipulate and lie, Cuba an energy blockade. Cuba is a state that is threatened and does not surrender. And despite all this, and thanks to socialism, Cuba is a state that resists, creates, and do not doubt it, it is a state that will triumph. Dear colleagues, today, April 16, we commemorate important milestone of our recent history, the heroic and massive response to the prelude of the mercenary invasion with the criminal bombardments of April 15th and the declaration of the socialist character of the revolution made by Fidel during the funeral of the first victims of that aggression. And though someday, although many did not know it by then, the Communist Party was being born. Fidel said it, and I quote, "In Girón we proclaim the socialist character of revolution. In Girón, practically we form our party." That is why we consider April 16 as the date of foundation of our party, the party of unity, the party of the Cuban nation, the party of the organization of the efforts of all towards the well-being of all. Long live Cuba. But history would not be worth if we do not learn from their lessons, if we don't take point of their irregularities and we transform them into learning. The attacks against the airports of Santiago de Cuba and San Antonio de los Baños in the prelude of the invasion with surgical strikes, using false flag operations in their airplanes, the sustained use of disinformation and deceit through communication media aim at confusing the population against the economic war, against diplomatic pressure to isolate the revolution, and threats, constant threats. We see practices that were never abandoned by those that attacked, and that today they continue to use them against the world. I've repeated so many times the interference formula. There are so many nations and processes threatened throughout the years that despite the use of technology and media power that they use, a wave of solidarity with Cuba continues to rise as evidence of the isolation of the imperialist policies that seek to blend us by asphyxiation. From this historic place where we can still listen the words of Fidel calling on the people to find their place for the combat to come. And today we pay homage to the heroes and martyrs of that day that the homeland wore decisively the militiamen uniform. We call to a national movement, an international movement of solidarity that goes to every corner of the world, the truth of Cuba, the suffering of the Cuban people due to the blockade, strengthened by the energy blockade, which we can qualify as genocide for the extreme levels of deprivation to which all Cubans are submitted. Desde el vital descanso interrumpido primero por el apagón y luego por el retorno de la corriente después de largas horas. The Cuban people suffer from the first disconnection of the blackout and then the return and the outage of power. It has led to the prioritization of industry, of transport, the vital services and the productions because we lack. The list is very long, and all of this comes from one single executive order that declares unusual, extraordinary threat. exactly what we are not. Compatriot, this moment is extremely challenging, and we take on that challenge as we did in April 16, 1961, to be ready to face serious threats, among them the military aggression. We do not want it, but it is a duty to prepare to prevent it, and if it was inevitable, to win it. We have the long victory. We believe in dialogue and the extraordinary power of peace. The history of this agreement between Cuba and the United States has shown that it's possible to reach a fruitful dialogue. It is difficult to see what will happen to the people of both lands if we are forced to drag through a conflict that is unfair and is uncalled for. To Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Ruz, who we celebrate his centenary of his birth in this 2026, we pay the greatest homage in this 65th anniversary of the great victory. Fidel not only led the battle of the Bay of Pigs. Fidel is Girón. Fidel is that conviction that a united people can defeat an empire. To resist the strikes of the everyday invasion is the victory that we write today. The best legacy to the fallen, to those that offered their lives in that April 16, 1961 for the independence and for socialism. While there is a man or woman willing to give their life for the revolution, we will be triumphant. The socialist character of our revolution is not a phrase of the past. It's the shield of the present and the guarantee of the future. Girón is today and will always be. Cuba does not surrender. No one surrenders here. We will fight. Here, as the song says, we will give it all. Long live the rebellious dignity of our people. Long live socialism. Homeland or death, we shall be victorious. What the imperialists cannot forgive us is that we are here and that we have made a socialist revolution under their noses. And that socialist revolution we defended with these rifles. So those were statements coming from Fidel in that day, as the Cubans are paying homage today, the commemoration of the 66th anniversary of their proclamation of the socialist character of the Cuban Revolution. As this is the event that we just had live, we saw the keynote speech of the president of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, reaffirming the conviction of the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban people to defend the socialist character of the revolution that was proclaimed 65 years ago, coming in the prelude of the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Bay of Pigs invasion that became the first great defeat of imperialism in America in less than 72 hours. See, you're going to have more cultural events, activities seems being prepared as part of the closure or the closing of this solemn commemoration of the 65th anniversary. We're seeing a representation of the Cuban youth marching as the militiamen and women did 65 years ago to defend the conquest of the revolution achieved in 1959.
No lo van a impedir las golondrinas, ni ventanales rotos, ni lunas nuevas, ni todos los andamios, ni las hormigas, ni flores, ni herejías, ni colmeneras. No lo van a impedir los corremundos, ni los soldados, ni las primaveras, ni aun negándolo el viento de muro en muro, ni aun negándolo al fin donde se crea. No lo van a impedir ni andén ni esquina, ni el temor de la Virgen si oscurece, ni el humo de las calles si llovizna, ni el canto del verano que anochece. No lo van a impedir ni el falso amigo, ni el que alimenta el cebo y la tortuga, ni el pequeño ladrón de mano fría, ni el terrible Don Juan de cara dura. No lo van a impedir ni moralistas, ni el indiscreto encanto del embrujo, ni ausentes millonarios, ni arribistas, ni aspirantes al hacha del verdugo. No lo van a impedir las bandoleras, ni el letrado galán de poco vuelo, ni inquisidores, ni aguafiestas, ni eternos sembradores de veneno. No lo van a impedir los enemigos, ni atentos intimistas alabados, ni burócratas tiernos, ni podridos, ni herederos, ni apóstoles errados. No lo van a impedir del valle al cielo, ni reyes del honor, ni periodistas, ni antiguos comediantes, ni embusteros, ni estudiantes de leyes, ni alquimistas. No lo van a impedir los generales, ni adorables doncellas pervertidas, ni apelables procesos judiciales, ni perros, ni cometas, ni suicidas. No lo van a impedir ni prohibidos, ni novios convencidos, ni hechiceros. No lo van a impedir las soledades a pesar del otoño.
¡Viva la Revolución Cubana!
Long live the Cuban Revolution.
Quiero en este son montuno cantar en aniversario del ataque mercenario del año 61.
Por Girón no vuelven, no que van, por Girón no vuelven más, porque encontrarán otro Girón que vale por 1.000.000.
Así nos despedimos.
Socialist Character has come to an end. It has concluded. We saw with the images of the support that we saw from all the people gathered here with the clear signals of the clear cry of support calling to reaffirming their support for the Cuban Revolution, and they're willing to fight to preserve the dignity, the sovereignty and independence that was achieved in 1959 and that was reaffirmed in 1961 following the first victory against imperialism in the defeat that lasted in less than 72 hours against the imperial forces, the mercenary forces that invaded the country. Recall this was the act of commemoration for the 65th anniversary of the proclamation of the Socialist Character of Revolution that came following the day of bombings of airports by false flags operations by the military army that aimed to create confusion among the Cuban people to believe that there was reason, but as the words of the different representatives that took to the stage in the ceremony said, the Cuban people responded with unity and with strength to defend the achievements and the conquests of the Cuban Revolution. With this, we're closing this special transmission broadcast of this event. Stay tuned with teleSUR for more updates.